William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. Welcome to the College of Complexes, being held at Barbeck's Restaurant at 8949 Garland Road, Dallas, Texas. Gently embracing the east side of White Rock Lake. When I entered, I was greeted like coming home to Grandma's house, warm and friendly. When visiting the Barbeck's Restaurant, tell them you want your reservations for the next College of Complex class.
Well, welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 205th meeting. We started meeting in February of 2009, and we've been meeting every week ever since. Actually, this started in Chicago in 1951 for the purpose of solving all the world's problems. They're still working at it. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require a speaker takes a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something, we don't care what it is. We give our speaker up to an hour to make a presentation. If they go over an hour, we cut them off. And if anybody interrupts the speaker, we have a rule here, only one fool at a time. So we will remind them of that rule in case if they interrupt the speaker. And when the speaker is through, we have questions and answers, not speeches. And then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants to gets 5 minutes at this podium to respond to what the speaker said for or against. So if the speaker's bad, the rebuttals are great. You know, anyway, it works out pretty good. Speaker's good, it depends. Anyway, and then the speaker gets the last word. He gets a comment and close the meeting. So that's how it works. But before we put on our speaker, now is the time for announcements. Anybody here have any announcements they want to make? George, you don't have any announcements? None? He always has an announcement. Any other? Susie, Jim has an announcement, I can tell.
Let me swallow. I thought you would be calling me, Tom.
Well, I did.
Oh. Well, welcome back to the party tonight. We're so glad to have you here. It's a delight to see the room filled with eager faces, and we're in a hospitable setting, and we appreciate being back in this environment again. As I've told people, and several people have described this using the same adjective, this room is so much more intimate. We're close together, we can hear each other well, and we see some faces. We're not sitting in the dark. And so we're just real pleased to be here. My only sermon point is to remind you to, they do not charge us a room fee for walking in the door, which most places do for a room. And we appreciate that, and we've agreed that all of us will order something. We don't care if it's a big full meal or a sandwich or a bowl of soup or a soup and salad or a dessert and something to drink, but find something for nourishment, and regardless of whether you get a little teeny tiny or a big one, be generous with the server. They're coming in here with a server and a helper serving all of us, usually at just about one time, which can be a bit of a challenge. And they do a good job of it, and we appreciate that. So welcome tonight. So glad to have you, and we're looking forward to this continuing on in a good mode. How about you guys? Okay, great. Thanks. Tom?
It's hard to add anything to that, so I won't. Our speaker next week we don't have a speaker. So if somebody wants to be a speaker next week, make sure you let me know. We've got leads out right now, but nobody seems to want to answer for next week. And but if somebody wants to be a speaker next week, they have something in them they want to get out. Yes? Can you hear what you said? Yeah. What do you think? Yeah, there's something we can do, but I'm a speaker. It sounds good. Yeah. Right, okay. That sounds good. We could do that if we don't have a speaker. Sounds good. Okay. Tonight, tonight Calvin Bluiett is our speaker. He's sitting right here. He's going to talk about causes and solutions of unemployment and solutions to foreign policy issues. He's an adjunct government professor at Clear Valley College. He's got a BA from Prairie View University, an MA from University of North Texas. He's been an insurance supervisor in underwriting, social science teacher, field representative of the Office of Economic Opportunity, public health analyst, and a team leader and consultant. He will discuss the causes and solutions of unemployment and foreign policy issues and potential solutions facing America. Calvin argues that we need solutions for the national unemployment dilemma and future foreign policy challenges. He will make and support his recommendations with justification. So without further ado, please give a very, very warm welcome to Calvin Bluiett. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. When we was here last time I was here, we had a big rain, which we needed. And so I was parked right out here, and I asked could I go out that door so I wouldn't get wet. And they let me go out that door, and I didn't get quite wet. But we needed the rain, and we've received rain since then. I didn't come here to talk about rain. We have had a number of people to talk about issues facing the nation. And one of the critical issues, I think, is unemployment. Unemployment is like 7-point-something%, and as a large number, you only count it if you're drawing unemployment compensation or actually seeking unemployment at the employment office. So a large number of people are not included in that count. So the unemployment is higher than that. And most of us are concerned about it. We have children or grandchildren, and our expectation when we were young, in 1960 when I graduated from college, I was determined to make the world better. I learned a great deal. My effort was going to be very, very limited, but at least that's what I wanted. And actually, my generation actually did better than the generation that preceded us. I fear that the generation that will come after us may do worse than we have done. So I have 3 children, and I hope we're able to send all 3 to college, and 2 are doing okay, and 1 is doing fair. But you can't bet 100% on all of them, but at least we were able to get them through college. In 1, we couldn't hardly get to stop. She went on and got a PhD in physics. And the one that's a nurse, I can't get her to go back and get a master's, but she's been practicing her trade since she graduated in '95. The reason I selected these 2 topics is because I have some hypotheses about the unemployment situation, the dilemma that we face, and also about the challenges that we face in the international community, in foreign policy, and defense policy. And I teach a course, first 2 courses in government at Cedar Valley College, and the students, I can't run these things by them and get feedback because it's a little beyond their understanding. And so I knew that we had a large number of people here, and I've attended meetings here before, and you're great thinkers, and maybe you can, and I welcome anything if my hypothesis may not be what you think the realities are. But the first thing I want to do is look at unemployment. Many people, we've heard Tom's solution to the problem, we've heard other people's solution to the problem, and so I've kind of incorporated some of his solutions. But the real causes to unemployment, as I see it, is 1 is poor public policy. After we passed the Economic Recovery Act in 2009, most people didn't say much about it, but that program was very successful, but it's too small. So many people said, well, we should have gotten more money. The Democrats only had 59 members in the Senate, but they needed 60 to get anything done. So they had to, well, it was probably two because they got 2 or 3 Republican senators that voted with them to pass the law, but Senator Collins said you got to reduce it, and from what it was expected was close to $900 billion, and so they settled for like $800 and something billion in Economic Recovery Act. And actually, from all indication, it was very successful, but the Democrats didn't get any credit for that. So poor public policy. We can understand the situation in poor public policy, the dilemma we've gone through this year with the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution, where the Congress has had plenty of times, in my observation, to pass appropriation bills, but they just continue to vote to abolish Obamacare, and they didn't do their work. And they really put the nation at risk. So I'm going to have more statements to say about that, but let me just run through. Globalization, that's a real issue, and it's affecting jobs, because many jobs, manufacturing jobs are almost all gone. And then they're moving into some of the other jobs, and anything you can do with a computer, it can be done in China or Bangladesh or something like that. And so a lot of jobs that people 4 or 5 years ago felt that they were secure, now they're insecure because they're outsourcing those jobs too. So globalization is another cause for the unemployment that we have in this nation. Deunionization. Many people are critical of unions. I've always supported unions, and when I was working and when I could be a union member, I was a union member until I got into supervision in government. Well, then a supervisor can't be a member of the union. So I think unions, we hadn't had unions. I don't think our success after World War II and up until recently would not have been there, because employers want to pay as little as they can for their workers. And unions served a major role in ensuring that most people who work earned a pretty good salary for what they were doing. And even they were advocates for a minimum wage also. So unions, the policies now in many states, even when the states where the unions be the strongest, in Michigan State, they are passing right-to-work laws, which is almost death to unions. Financial deregulation, and we've had a lot of talk about the Glass-Steagall Act, which was abolished. President Clinton signed it, and Senator Phil Gramm was the author of the bill. And because we got out of deregulation, it's a major cause of the recession that we entered into in 2007 and 2008, and still is not completely resolved. So we need to do something about financial regulation. A poor education system. Employers argue that there are jobs that are available in the United States. There are not enough jobs that's available for everybody, but we don't have people trained to do them. And all these jobs does not require college education. It does require that you have a trade, some technical skills. And we have a number of those jobs available, but we don't have people trained. The India's Institute of Technology is probably one of the better schools in the world, and 2/3 of their graduates are hired by American companies, and they argue we hire them because we can't find them among Americans. So we need to do something with our education system so that our students know what jobs of the future are, what they're going to be, and so they can prepare for those jobs, and they won't have that excuse, the employers won't. And there are structural changes in the workplace. If we think jobs are going to come back to the United States that existed 20, 30 years ago, you can forget it. They're not going to come back. We're in a world now where you've got to have a profession or a trade to survive. And if you don't have that, then your living is going to be marginal. And just like the minimum wage in the United States is what, $7.85 or something like that, less than $8. And you can't do very well on that. So there are structural changes, and many of the jobs that existed through technology, digital, and robots, they're doing a lot of jobs that people used to do. And we've got to try to come up with ways to deal with that. So if we think they're coming back the way they were, they're not. Companies are moving production back from China to the United States. The chairman of GE, General Electric, is the lead person in that, and they are moving jobs back in the United States. But one paradigm is like in California, they built one of these huge distribution centers. They don't have men, working. They have robots doing that work. So the people to get the jobs is one who can repair the robots, maintain the robots, and program the robots. Is, the thing that men used to do in particular is falling by the wayside. So those are structural changes. From my vantage point, those are the real causes of the problems we face in unemployment in the United States. Now, what are some of the solutions to the preceding dilemmas? We need public policy that acknowledges the dynamic changes in a global economy. It is very difficult for us to get public policy. And since President Obama has been president, his State of the Union have always been a jobs program or something to help us get out of the dilemma that we are in. But he can't get it enacted. So we have a problem with getting public policy enacted. And we saw a demonstration of that with the debt ceiling and the continuing resolution. And that's not over. That's just a short-term thing. In February, the debt ceiling has got to be dealt with again. And if they haven't passed appropriation bills, then we're going to have to deal with another continuing resolution. I don't think we'll have the same problem we had a few weeks ago, but that's still a possibility. In America, we said we are a democracy, a representative democracy. And we define democracy as government by the people, for the people, and of the people. And if you answer that question honestly, you would say in America, we don't have that kind of democracy right now. Because what we have in America is government for the rich, by the rich, and of the rich. The top 3%, they're the ones who are making decisions, and that's the kind of democracy. That's not the kind of democracy we need. And so we need to change our focus and do what's best for the nation and not what's best for a particular group. We need to change the filibuster rule. If you have a majority in the Senate, like the Democrats have right now, the minority can block it. Nothing can happen we've seen that time after time. And so, I just don't think the majority is supposed to be able to enact legislation. But we shouldn't have these vehicles. I mean, sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. But I think they need to change the policy on that. We're having the same problem right now in trying to get appointments to the appellate court in D.C. It's one of the most powerful courts next to the Supreme Court. And they have about 2 or 3 vacancies. And they don't want to do that. So we need to do something about that. We need meaningful campaign reform so that the rich does not have any more power than the average citizen. We had the Campaign Finance Reform Act some years ago, and the Supreme Court kept chipping away, so there's nothing left. But what they were trying to do was deal with what they call soft money, where large corporations can give as much money as they want. And so the soft money prohibited that, and they set a limit to what individuals could give. And so individuals can give $2,500 to as many candidates as you can. I don't have that many $2,500 to go around. So that means that what I give is insignificant. And then the Supreme Court ruled that money is free speech. And people are supposed to be able to do what they want to do with their money. I defend that up to a point. When they get to where they're going to determine what the government's going to do, then I don't think that's what the founders had in mind. I don't think they had in mind. So that's what I mean. We need campaign reform that creates an equilibrium so we all can have some kind of influence. My solution to that would be public financing of the national election. But when I check with my students and ask how many check when they do their income tax, yes, then you're not going to cost you nothing one way or the other. And they all check no, because in their mind, they're going to lose $1. So that's really kind of a referendum to see whether Americans are willing to public finance it. If we public finance it, then we all have a stake, no matter how rich or how poor we are. And then, so we try to deal with the Campaign Finance Reform Act, but the courts have shipped away to that. There's nothing left. We need to ratify a constitutional amendment that will overturn the Citizen United decision. That's the decision that said money is free speech. And we need a constitutional amendment. That's the only thing we can do to get rid of that. We need an executive order requiring all companies seeking contracts to disclose its political donation. We need transparency. And so that's, the president can do that. I don't know why he's reluctant to do it, but he can do that. It would go to the courts, and the courts could rule it as being unconstitutional, but until he does it and that happens, well, I think he could do that. So that's what I think we need to do as far as public policy. We need to try, and rather than making it difficult for people to vote or discourage people not to vote, we need to develop legislation that will encourage people to vote. And we need to try to have a system where I believe if citizens get the right information, they'll make the right decision. But too many citizens believe what they hear if it sounds good. And particularly if it deals with some of the peripheral issues that they like. So if a political party or candidates is there, they'll vote for that, regardless of what is going to happen to the nation. I think these peripheral issues are something that should be handled by the church, and I don't think the federal or the state government ought to be involved in it. The situation about abortion, God give us all the right to sin or not sin, consequences to it. I don't think the state should play God. We're supposed to have the separation of church and state. I think when the state step in and we're going to tell people what to do and things like that, I think they should not. We need to fix the globalization crisis. The United States national economy functions primarily as if we are not in a global economy. We have the largest economy in the world right now. China is number 2, Japan is number 3. But our national economy is not designed in a way that we can be competitive in the global economy. And I think we need to take steps to change that so that it is. We need to focus on fair trade rather than free trade. We have NAFTA, that's a free trade agreement among Mexico, Canada, and the United States. We have trade deficit with both those, with Mexico and Canada. Why is that fair trade? Fair trade means it's an equilibrium. Free trade means that you just, we do what we do with NAFTA. I supported NAFTA. We signed a similar agreement with South Korea, Panama, and Colombia, I believe, recently. They will do the same thing. And since we don't manufacture anything, what are we going to sell? So we'll probably have a deficit with that country also. And we're trying to develop a general one for all of Central and South America, and a larger one for most nations that we deal with in the Pacific Coast in that area. So we need fair trade. We need to change multinational corporation taxing policy, which will give them an incentive to move manufacturing back to the United States. Any profit that a multinational earns in another country, they don't pay taxes to the United States. And we have laws that it really creates an incentive for them to outsource. And we need to change those laws so it will encourage them to bring manufacturing jobs back here. Now, there is an initiative that I indicated the CEO of General Electric is leading, and there are movements in that area in certain states. We need a better equilibrium between multinational corporations' self-interest and American national interests. Multinationals don't have any loyalty to no nation. They are concerned about what they want and the money that they can earn. And a lot of the materials that we buy from Canada, that are made in Canada, are manufactured by American companies that's headquarters in the United States. And we buy it. And they make huge profits. And that don't help the nation. So I think if Mr. Rumley said a corporation is a person, I don't agree with him 100%. The Supreme Court ruled a long time ago that a corporation is an artificial being. can sue and be sued. That doesn't make it a person, but in those areas they can function like a person. But if they are, then they ought to have patriotism like I have. They ought to pay taxes like I do. So that's, I think that would be the equilibrium we need to see. We need to establish a national industrial policy. We're going to do things in the manufacturing area. We need a national industrial policy. We don't have one. And if we had a national industrial policy, we'd be planning in a way with private companies, in a way that's what's best for our national interests and also what's good for them. It'll be an equilibrium, I hope, not one that would be one-sided. So I think if we take those actions, that will probably deal with the globalization issues. There are other things that I will deal with under education. We need to ensure that unions has statutory rights to organize in an environment with incentives for workers to join unions. The white-collar groups and public officials, public employees make up the bulk of the unions now, not manufactured workers, because there's not that many. And so, but they're, even in the public sector, they are trying to deny unions the right to organize. And I think that should not be. We need to pass a federal law making the right to work laws illegal, because I think that's what most states, Michigan passed the right to work law. Another state passed the right to work law. And that means, it doesn't mean you have a right to work. Right to a job, it means if you have a union a shop that's unionized, then you don't have to join the union to work there. And so that's unfair. Years ago, if they did that, the union would clip their neck. But we are moved beyond that. But the right to work law, that's why it's so popular in Texas, is because it prevents unions from organizing. So, you know, we all have greed. If I can get the same thing you working and not pay the union dues, if I don't think, I'll do that. And that's what the right to work law encourages. And so too many people do that, it will ultimately destroy a union. So that's what I think. We need to require, one of the arguments I had when unions were strong is that neither the unions nor the employees wanted compulsory mediation, arbitration. And for that reason, just like a gentleman who was a union leader, union employee years ago, making $41 an hour. And that's why that encouraged steel mills to move out of the United States, particularly. We invested more in steel mills in Japan and Germany than we did in the United States. And as a result of that, the factories became somewhat obsolete. And so we don't have that many steel mills operating in the United States. But if we had compulsory arbitration, it would be an equilibrium, because what employees recognize, you know, they would haggle with the union, but eventually they would acquiesce. Because what they would do is just pass the cost on to the consumer. And so we need someone to be looking at not only for the union and employee, but for the consumer. And so that's why I think we need to have compulsory arbitration, so it won't get out of hand. We need to pass a minimum wage law that is indexed to inflation or deflation. And so we don't have to go through this hassle all the time. If the inflation goes up, then the minimum wage goes up. My theory is that if the job needs to be done, then it ought to pay a living salary. And the question is, what is the living salary? I dealt with this in my class, and one told us, well, $15 an hour won't cut it. But we had a small community in Washington that voted in the community for a $15 minimum wage hour, and it was passing when I heard it. And what's that?
For only Walmart.
Well, this was not, well, I don't know, they said a $15 an hour.
For any store of a certain number, Walmart was the only one.
That's what it was, okay, well,
Directed
at Walmart, okay.
So Walmart said, we're not building any more stores, and they kept the law.
Don't interrupt you, the speaker of the time.
Yes, I answered.
Okay, it didn't bother me, it's okay. Okay, we need flexicurity. That's a new term. That means employers should be required to provide the same benefits to temporary and part-time workers as full-time workers. Now, most people who work part-time have no benefits. And so many companies are hiring more part-time temporary workers in order not to provide the benefits. So if you need people to work and they're doing a job, there ought to be some benefits with it. So that's what the flex security thing means. We need to professionalize human services. What I mean, there are a lot of jobs, and I became kind of confronted with that. My wife was real sick, and she's still sick, but not as sick as she was then. And so I had to consider getting someone to sit with her, because I couldn't be there all day. Even though I'm retired, I couldn't, it would cause us both to die. Because I don't know, it's hard to look at your loved one in that condition. And then it's hard to be objective in the situation, because you are really capitulate to what the spouse wants. And you need to get away from it so you can think more clearly. So I talked with, the people that do that, and it wasn't cheap, $18 an hour. But then the person who was doing it wasn't getting $18. The company was getting their share of it. So that's, we need there are a lot of jobs just like that, like aides and home health aides and a number of other places. They ought to be paid, they need to be paid a living wage. And so that's what I'm talking about. And there's a lot of jobs, and many jobs that will exist in the future falls in that category. So that's what I think needs to be done. Now the fourth one, financial deregulation. I believe we need to reenact the Glass-Steagall law and other regulation that will make excessive speculation illegal. The banks are fighting. They fought for the Dodd law, Franklin law. They fought that, and it was being enacted, and it was enacted anyway, and they're still fighting in the regulatory, trying to get what they want in regulations. They want the opportunity to do whatever they want to do, and if it was based on their money, it would be okay, in my opinion. But when we know when the banks and everybody did what they did in before 2007, the taxpayers really had to bail them out, $700 billion. And the banks still don't. I really empathize with anyone who's poor, working class, that has a bank account. If you don't have $10,000 or $12,000 in a checking account, you have all kind of penalties fees that they charge you. And it seems like we make it hard for the least of us, and we ought to make it better for those people. So that's what I'm concerned with. They need to separate government-insured commercial lending from risky trading operation. Because what the banks do, if they're a member of FDIC and they go bankrupt, the FDIC pays that $250,000, not the bank. And so if they're going to take risks, that's okay. But they need to pay for it. They need to, whatever the consequences are, they need to absorb it. The citizens shouldn't absorb that. So that's what banks need to market to fund risky investment, not individual deposits. Someone made a statement here ago. I know in Greece, that country passed a law that affect everybody's account. That does not apply to the United States. The United States is not a member of the European Union, and that is not here right now. We may look at it and be certain it doesn't come here, because that's another way of shifting responsibilities to the depositors rather than the banks. Bank-owned capital available to repay those loans when needed, not the taxpayers. We need better regulation of the derivatives. This is something most people don't understand. I'm not certain that I totally understand it, but it's risky stuff. And it has the appearance of paying a great return, but it doesn't work out that way. So and we don't regulate those. We need to regulate derivatives. And we need to bring shadow banking into the light. We need better transparency is needed, so people understand what these institutions are doing. And I think that would help some. The fifth one is fix our dysfunctional educational system. America needs to out-build, out-educate, and out-innovate other nations in the world. We're not doing it. And we need to figure out ways to do that. We need to work side with American business to mobilize business leaders to train by providing company interns and training for people who are in college. I remember when I was in college in 1960, the people who was in engineering, they knew the math and they knew the theory, knew no practice because it never worked. You know? And that affected them when they would get jobs. All they'd leave Texas in 1960. No engineer could get a job in Texas if you're African American. They went to Washington, California, New York, and other places like that. So we need to kind of bring it in. You know, companies benefit from education. And in our dilemma in Texas in 2011, the one thing that Governor Prairie didn't do that companies really wanted done, they didn't want to cut education by $5 billion. But he did it anyway. We need to raise standards for teaching and learning. And I'm not saying that we need to just put all the onus on the teacher. I've been a teacher 5 years in Wichita Falls. It's a tough job. And it's one of the hardest jobs and one of the most challenging jobs that I think that I've ever had. But parents need to play a major role. And where you have parents involved, you can teach their children. You don't have no discipline problems. The big problem in Dallas, most African Americans, young African Americans who have children in public schools, don't live in Dallas. They move to Duncanville, DeSoto, Lancaster, Cedar Hill, Red Oak. And it leaves the children of children in the ISD. And actually, the Latinos is 62% of the ISD, and African Americans 25%. Whites about 7 or 8%, and most of them go to the schools that's in their communities, or to the Booker T. Washington Performing Arts, Townview, which are outstanding schools. So we need to embrace good teaching and provide adequate funding to encourage creativity and passion. Stop the testing as a criterion for evaluation. Most teachers teach to test. And my experience in the writing part at junior college, they can't write. They don't have any breaks in anything, no subtopics. They just start at the beginning, and if it's 4 pages, it's 4 pages, and no breaks. You can give them a protocol and they still won't use it because that's what they were taught in high school, and that got them through. But, so you can pass the tax or the teach or whatever it is, and you still can't be employed because you can't do the work. And almost anything you do now, you got to write. You got to write. You got to write. So we need to shift from testing to using the curriculum to get to have a good curriculum. But our whole curriculum is messed up because of the influence of the Texas Board of Education. And they deal more with ideology than do anything else. And most of them are not teachers, and so that's what is bad about it. Ensure affordable education for all students seeking higher education. Students that get student loans, I just empathize with them. If you don't pay that student loan back, you have bad credit the rest of your life. You got to pay it back. And you have students graduating from undergrad with a $100,000 debt. That's not right. That's not right. That's not good for the nation. And we need to invest more in technology and research, because a lot of the innovation, a great deal of innovation, comes from research. And the National Institute of Health does a great deal of research, and it too was affected by the continuing resolution dilemma. We need to work as a catalyst with state and local school districts, colleges, and universities to ensure that our children have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be successful in the global economy. They need to be able to think. They can't think. They need to be able to analyze. They're weak in that. They can't really identify a problem. If you can't identify a problem, you most certainly can't solve it. And these things can be built into curriculum so that in the end of the course, they have some ideas how to do that. I've spent too much time on this, but future job classifications. One is Robert Reich. He's been years writing about this. So he has 3 classifications of jobs. Routine productive services. That's like limited manufacturing activity we have. In-person service. That's like the social service. That's growing because we have more people needing social service in a whole broad spectrum of programs. Symbolic analytic service. So that's where the jobs are going to be in those areas. And students in high school, in junior college, you ought to have a vision of what you want to do. Because if you don't, when you finish high school, you're behind. And so you have electives that you can take to strengthen you in those things. So, but my students don't agree with me. Another classification was given as solving unstructured problems, acquiring, making sense of, and communicating new information, and non-routine manual labor. That latter one doesn't pay anything. So that's the education thing. Fix the employment problems stemming from structural change. We create an environment where workers are retrained for positions that exist. And because of the robots, and one of ours used Walmartization, and that's, they're the largest company in the world, particularly in the United States. They employ more people, they don't pay them anything. The benefits are limited. We shouldn't permit that to exist. We create an incentive to encourage companies to return manufacturing jobs to America. We've talked about that. We need to fund infrastructure as a tool to increase employment in America. Our bridges, our roads, and our dams are all in danger of falling apart. And this is really not a giveaway. This is an investment. Infrastructure is an investment in our nation. And its dividends derive from that. That's not just like giving someone something. What are the foreign policy issues facing America? I know I'm going to get a lot of challenges on this one. My position that war is obsolete. I look at World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. What are we going to gain from Iraq and Afghanistan? Zero. And look at the money we've spent there. If we were fighting a conventional war, I believe we could whip anybody in the world, in the nation, in the world. But we are equipped to deal with the war that we fought and fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. We aren't equipped to deal with that. So all of our huge investment is somewhere else, and so we got to, borrow money from China to try to beef up in that area. So we've shown what the SEALs can do, the Green Berets in the Army, and then they have something else in the Marine Corps. But that's a small group of people. But that's the kind of war we got to deal with in the future. So I feel that the problems we're facing is globalization, and I've already talked about that, but international relations. My study of history, England, when it had the great empire, was very, very good in negotiation, just talking. It didn't cost that much to talk and try to come up with some common grounds to deal with issues. And they did that very well. The United States has always been, in my observation, too impatient. We want to do things quick. And when you're dealing, when we went into Iraq, I was adamant opposed to it, and I told them, I said, you need to look, Iraq goes back to before Christ. And you're going to try to tell them to adopt our culture? No way. And then they don't agree with themselves. You got 3 blocks over there. And we can't solve that. They don't care anything about what we do in the United States. But look at the situation now. It's total chaos. And the president wanted us out before we got out, and now he wants money. But we give him money, we got to borrow it from China. So we don't have any money to give him. So that's why I said war is obsolete. And we look at the books. We haven't finished paying for World War II in Korea. And wars, you know, you spend $1 in the domestic economy, it turns over about $10, 10 times. You spend it in defense, you buy a tank or something else, that's it. You know, we don't have a depreciation system in the government to depreciate stuff, to have a depreciated value. So it turns over about 2 times. And so that's what most of us don't understand. So we've got to work with other nations and through international organizations. It's slow, it's very slow. But I think the step that was taken, which Russia was vetoing in the Security Council, and with Syria, I believe that's going to work. And they had top meetings today with Iran, and there's still some issues there, and I'm not clear what they are. But that's the only way you can solve. You just can't work people. I was taught a little fella, you know, when you're a little guy, if you fight someone, you know, next day you're friends, forget about it. But when you become a man, if Tom whoops me, he better hide. He's not gonna get that opportunity no more. And that's just the way it was with grown people. You can't do that with grown people. You've got to find a way to resolve your issues short of fighting. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And some people don't like the United Nations, but that's all we have right there. Now, the United Nations and NATO, we had an organization in Southeast Asia. They aren't working that well right now because we didn't give the attention that we gave NATO and the United Nations. The United Nations is not perfect, but as far as an international organization, that's all we have right now. I don't hear anybody coming up with a better idea of how to deal with these problems, because we cannot whip the world. The United States cannot whip the world. We spend more than anyone else but defense, but we can't whip the world. Even if we couldn't occupy the world. So that's what we got to find. We got to use diplomacy. We must use diplomacy in dealing with it. Then we have environmental issues. The stuff that happened in Japan and China, it's ended up in Washington, California. In the air, it blows everywhere. And China has the worst air in the world, and we have the second worst air in the United States in Texas. So we need a system to deal with that where people can get together, and China is recognizing that they're having terrific problems with the air and stuff like that. Just think about how increase in respiratory disease that we have in the United States. And all those, it's because of the pollution in the air that we are not dealing with. And it's not, if we clean ours up, it would still be dirty because we got to work through international justice. We got to work through international organizations to deal with international justice. We can't go in and solve the problem as a nation. So we got to learn to trust people and work and be a little bit more patient. Because if we had been patient, we wouldn't have went to Iraq and probably not to Afghanistan. Because if bin Laden was what we was looking for, and that's what they told us, then the CIAs would have got in a year. They would have tore up no buildings. It would be nothing. Just got it. The CIA. We talk about the National Security Agency, but we need them. We need them because nobody loves the United States in the world. We're pretty much alone, and we better keep our guards up. We'll have another 9/11. And so I know a lot of people have, we have a constitution that works against it, but we passed the Patriot Act, and that's the basis of doing it. But we've got to find new ways to solve foreign policy issues. We need to have a recognition that the national state is becoming obsolete, and that shows you we can't solve the world's problems. We can't tell other people what they ought to do. We don't understand our own history, and we certainly don't understand China's history, or Iraq's history, or Afghanistan's history. And if we're going to deal with people, we got to start where they are, and we got to understand their history. Most people come to junior college from Asia or Africa, they know more about our history than we do. And so, because it was done, we need to understand the culture and history of all people. Our culture is young. Iraq is very old. England is very old. France, Germany, they're all very old because those places have been around a long time. And so we started in 1876. So our culture is young. And most people, you start intruding on their culture, they push back. So that's what we got to do. The United States cannot solve the following problems alone. Defense issues, we've already pointed a number of those out. Environmental issues, we can't do it by ourselves. International justice, we can't do it by ourselves. International trade, we've got to enter agreements with people, but it ought to be fair trade, not free trade. We need a foreign policy principle based on diplomacy and working through international organizations. The core should be right now, unless we create something else, the United Nations. We need to perhaps reorganize the Security Council. In one nation, permanent nation of the Security Council shouldn't be able to block what the majority of the nations want to do. You know, that's a two-way sword. That sometimes it works for us, but most time it works against us. So there needs to be another formula. So I suggest maybe a 2/3 formula, but not without the filibuster. so that's what I think we need. The United Nations needs, and that's what I just got through talking about. Perhaps it would be better for our dollars, the United States dollars, to use our resources to fight poverty in undeveloped nations as opposed to war. President Bush, what he did for HIV in Africa, I think has been very, very helpful and created some positive feelings among those people with us. And you know, in Africa, sometimes all they need is a cow, or a goat, or a whale, and you know, it's not that much expensive things. It would mean so much to them. So if we did more of that, that's not a total solution, but in an undeveloped nation like Africa and some other places, that would be fundamental. And they would respect us for it, rather than going over there and saying, adopt a democracy and what we have here. The U.S. must act with other nations and recognize the rise of nations like China, Asia, and Brazil, and you know, Argentina. There's going to be, so the pie is going to be divided differently. And so we need to prepare ourselves for that. Strengthen ties with Europe, Asia, and the Americas. They need a better equilibrium between Israel and the Palestinians. I think I call Israel the 51st state because and they have a huge political lobby in the United States. And the Palestinians is a dysfunctional family, and most of us know of dysfunctional families. Problems in families are difficult to solve. And we can see that as we study the history of the Palestinians and the Israelites. So I think the Palestinians think we are favorable to Israel, and that creates some of the problems we have. A different approach in dealing with the issues among nations such as Egypt, Libya, and Iran. I think what we started doing with Syria is probably what we ought to be doing, and what's going on in Iran. We just have to keep on talking. And with the sanctions we have on Iran is hurting a great deal. So I think they're ready to do it. We need to articulate a vision for the world based on fairness and reciprocal respect, where all nations feel a sense of community. And we do that, I think that will solve some of the problems. And I believe the recommendations I made would help. Thank you. What's that? Okay. The question and answer period. This is a British thing, isn't it? Yeah. There it is, right there.
Who wants to be first?
No, I can do it now. Yes, yes. And they didn't give details of it, and I haven't done any research, and Jim Nair's probably right, because we do have a problem with Walmart, and there's a lot of people talk about doing things with Walmart to try to help them do better as far as the employees are concerned. Well, you can just go ahead and ask it. I'll repeat it. Yeah, go ahead and ask the question, and I'll repeat it.
Do you think that young people today, because they've grown up with conditions as they are, do they think this is normality, where most of us believe this is not normality? So they're not inclined to do much because they think, oh, this is the normal way it is. Like, as you say, $100,000 costs. Yeah, they've been conditioned by the current circumstance, so they're not as eager to protest because they don't remember anything different. Do you see that?
No, that's prevalent amongst, it's not all people who don't go to college, because if you're an engineer, it's very, very in depth. Even if you're an accountant, it's very, very in depth. It's not broad, and in many fields, it's very medicine, very in depth, dental. And so these are educated people that didn't spend much time studying history or economics, political science. So their children may accept this as normal. But the one thing that gives me hope is the Occupy Wall Street thing that happened a couple of years ago. These were young people. And a large number of the young people in the social sciences and law and areas like that and sociology, they question certain things, and they don't consider this as normal. They do have issues with us old folks leaving them with a big debt. So I think you're going to have, young people are not like my generation. I don't know. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in 1960. Well, I graduated old, 23, because I was sickly as a young person, and we had to walk 2.5 miles, and my parents let me walk the first year. So I lost a year. I should have graduated at 18, but it was 19. But they don't, and when I graduated, I believe in jointed organization. They don't believe in it. My daughter, who's a nurse, I tried to get her to join the National Nurses Association. Her mother enrolled in one, but said, you got to pay it at the end of the 2-year period. And she still didn't do it. The one that's PhD in physics, I had a hard time to get her to join the National Physics Organization, because that's where you get ideas about what's going on. They're reluctant to join anything, and I think in our case we made it too easy for them. They didn't have to worry about nothing. Althea never had a job until she went to college, and then she got opportunities to go to Rice for a summer, and they gave her $2,500, and Princeton for a summer, and they gave her $3,000, Fermilab in Chicago, and they gave her maybe $4,000. That was all. She never worked. And when she graduated, she had a postdoc at the Navy Research Lab, and she's just now teaching in the university, earning what she was earning as a postdoc. So I think they need to be exposed to issues more. Most of them don't care nothing about issues. Somewhere if we can get it in the internet system or the Facebook or Twitters like that, what they look at, maybe they do it, because I've been telling them that, I use political cartoons to try to teach them to think. You cannot define the problem if you haven't watched the news. So they look to read that. I said, well, that's describing it. That's not what the issue is. And so I think we have a lot of work to do.
Second question. Do you think there's a deliberate engineered apathy in the public?
I hate to say this, but I do. And I think it's built into the education system. And I think that's where they get that from. And that apathy, they say, well, my vote's not going to count. It doesn't, what I do doesn't matter. And I say, well, the working people is 80% of the people. If we get together and say something's wrong, they got to change. But if we don't, it's not going to change. So I think we have to watch what's in the curriculums in schools, because my understanding in Texas, they don't teach civics in high school no more. And so they don't know how to vote when they finish high school. And that's because of the State Board of Education. Yes?
I have a million questions, but I'm just going to focus on one. Toward the end there, you were talking about how it would help if we fought poverty in other countries. But what can we do to help stop the cycle of poverty in this country? Because poverty is a direct influence on education, on jobs, on everything. And sometimes fixing poverty can be as simple as providing security, providing safety so the kids aren't scared to walk to and from school, things like that. What can we do to help stop the cycle of poverty? Because if
within the United States or within
the United States, so because parents that are poor are more likely to have children that are poor, and what I think they said that poor kids are only 20% likely to go to college. So what can we do about
probably
that?
Less than that, because out of all of us, about 30% go to college and get a degree. So the poor is much lower than that. I'm going to give you some experience that I had in OEO. I don't know when any of you are old enough to know when we had Lyndon B. Johnson created War on Poverty, which was the Office of Economic Opportunity. I had the great experience of working there 2 years. Started in '68 and ended in end of April of 1970. But it was a real revelation. I'm going to deal with some things that contributed to poverty. We did research. We found that people who were on welfare, even if you gave them a package that would be better than the welfare, they were very, very reluctant to accept it because they become secure in the welfare system. They didn't want to get out because it was an unknown. Another thing we found out, teenage pregnancy has been an issue in the United States for a long time. And we found that teenage got pregnant, the research we did, in their own home between the time that they got home from schools and their parents got home from work. And so, those are some things we can deal with, and that contributes to pregnancy. One of the things research says right now, a lot of women who make a mistake, they come out of it, and some on welfare come out of it, go to college, and do extremely well, but too many don't. And I think that's where we got to work. We got to work with the education system to teach everybody that you have a responsibility for yourself. Your parents may not have done what they should have done, but you cannot use that as a crutch. You got to step up, and we got to, some way, it's not going to be easy, it's not going to be quick, to try to get them to see that they are responsible for themselves. And they need to use the tools that's there to get out of it. Because, right now, it's terrible because very few people can get out of poverty. If you look at real poor communities, children that grow up in their communities don't ever hardly get out of it. And so that's their world. In some way, we got to deal with it. One of the things, and since a great deal of my career was in government, is that the government is very reluctant to get into the internal affairs of a family, unless the police gets involved in it. But we've got to find ways to get in. And I had a coworker once, he was a Jewish person. He challenged all the African Americans and says that an article had been written and said the African Americans, the middle class, move away. And that just leave the poor. And if we want to help the African Americans, the middle class blacks had to do it. And we need to step up to the plate. And that's what I alluded to when I said most of the African American professionals that used to live in Dallas with children don't live there no more. And so we leave the poor to make for themselves, and it just gets worse. So we got to have ways to get it. Head Start was a good program, and it's still a good program because it really gave them a head start. It was one of the most successful programs that OEO had. It helped them to, when they went to school, then they were fairly competitive. But, it doesn't cover everybody. We have pre-kindergarten, and I think it does some good. We cut that in 2011. So the programs that will help us get out of that, we've got to support. they aren't going to be able to do it themselves. You know, so that's, I don't know what I give an answer. The big problem in the world is poverty, because people who are poor envy those persons who are not poor. And Americans, when I was in Germany, and we try to demonstrate that we're the richest people in the world. In reality, we're not. Right now, 65% of the people who work for a salary earn $35,000 or less. 25% earn between $35,000 and $100,000, and 10% earn above $100,000. Now, if you got to pay $130,000 for a home, you're poor for 30 years if you pay it. So that don't make us a rich nation, and we need to try to stop conveying that across the world. But because I think the issues in Afghanistan is poverty, and you know, there's propagandas, these groups, the Al-Qaeda and all those other groups, to try to brainwash them that the reason they're poor is because of the United States, because we manipulate people all over the world, and that becomes their reality. So when they have a chance, they're going to strike out at us. So if we could fight, that's why I said we fight poverty, and we would have less of that. Yes?
I think that the problem in Afghanistan and countries like it is more deep ignorance, because those are the easiest to manipulate. But anyway, this was my point, and I wanted to get your input. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. If there's the law of supply and demand is very difficult to break.
Yes.
You can moderate it, but you cannot break it. It's just a law that reigns all activity, all human activity. So, in my mind, if there is money being taken away from education, is there money that's not being invested in education? If the powers that be, that I'm not going to identify because I don't know who they are, needed employees that were prepared, the money would not be taken out of education, and there would be money going into education. So in my mind, it is easier for us as a country to bring people that have already been trained in other countries, because that's part of globalization. Bring people that are already trained in other countries, and us not train them and spend the money on training them.
Correct. And the thing about it, we can pay them a little less than we pay Americans. And so that's I agree with that perception. I think in 2011, not all of the corporate community, but a good segment of the corporate community said, no, don't cut education, because we need educated employees. And, you know, some of the people who come from India, England controlling, India was a colony of England for a long time, so many of them speak English. But and some people in China do. But sometimes you have a language problem when you bring people in here from other people. So it would be better for us to train. And even companies, you know, it's educators sometimes don't do what they ought to do. I argue that the reason we had the TCAP, or the testing system, is because we let the politicians do it. If the educators had done it, it would have been done differently. But they didn't do nothing, and so the politician went in. So the politician has to have something they can evaluate, you know, success or failure, and so that's what they use it for. So I think education is the cause of a lot of problems. Poverty, not understanding, not being discerning about what you hear and see. Don't just, because someone says something, don't buy into it.
But if they needed to be educated, they would be investing in it.
They would, if they got the right kind of education.
So it's not, they don't have the demand, they don't have the need, or else they would be more investing.
Well, I mean, I think the employers recognize, and I think the public policy recognize we need to spend more for education, but that's not political rewarding. And so that's why they do what they do. And whether we like it or not, I didn't talk much about it, but money in politics is what dominates. That's what I meant, that the rich determines what's going to be done. And they want all the money they can. And that's, I would say, a more recent phenomenon. There's been some of that since day one. But there were, you know, the Rockefellers and made all that money. They began to give it away through foundations and stuff like that. We don't have very many people. Gates and the other guy from Nebraska, I believe, he's Buffett. They're doing it, and a few more, but most of them are just keeping it all themselves. And that's what has to be. But we got to wake up the working class Americans. We've got to give them the tools to think. I read a book in the 70s. Some guy wrote about crisis in the classroom. And it said historically in Texas and all over the United States, state universities designed to teach students to do a job. To do a job, not to think. The thinkers were going to the Ivy League schools. And the wealthiest, if their children were smart enough and they didn't have a legacy program, then there were a good many of them. So we created, and I hope nobody is familiar, SMU, TCU, Rice schools in Texas were created via Harvard. It's a very good school. But they created those schools so that they could make contributions and their children could go there. They were taught to think. And that's where I think the problem started. We wanted people to do and not think. And now we're in a world, you got to think. Yes.
Yes, I have a question here. You touched on it slightly, the State Board of Education of Texas. And maybe you can expound on that a little bit, how they're appointed, or are they elected?
They are elected.
And what do they actually do?
Well, you know, you have a permanent, like you had a permanent university fund that Texas, UT, Texas, and Austin, and A&M, and Prairie View participating in. And you have a similar form for elementary and secondary education. They somewhat manage the distribution of that. And they do a great deal in curriculum and selecting books. That's the biggest thing they do, because basically most of what's done is done in independent school districts, the boards and superintendents and those people. But these things have an impact on, you know, like what they've done is a book that has too many Latinos and African Americans, they pull out and say they haven't done nothing to achieve that. They put in, it's ideology. It's the real conservative ideology that they try to put in the books, but it's hurting the students in Texas. Because you go to other states, then they're not even competitive with them. We're talking about we're not competitive with China and India and other places. We're not even competitive among states because of this. And that's put there so people can learn to think and analyze what people have done and what they espouse and try to do something about it. So that's what it does. You know, TEA, Texas Education Agency, it actually allocates the dollars, but they have some policy thing to do. And the conservatives is the majority. And so that's why they're elected from some districts that we have, I think, 2 or 3 African Americans and probably equal number of Latinos on that board. Yeah, you vote for them. They're on the ballot. Well, you need to vote. You need to vote somebody in there that's going to try to encourage people who's going to do something. Any other questions? Yes.
Are you familiar with the term outcome-based education?
I've heard the term used, yeah, outcome-based.
There is a book that is written with that title by an Oregon legislator, and they began to see the educational system in Oregon just disintegrating like it has all over the nation. And so he researched this and found that the Guggenheim Foundation had sponsored a group of educators to create a new educational system for the United States. And it was to do exactly what you're talking about, create drones that go into slots to do that job and not create creative thinkers. And we need to wake up to this and it comes out of Washington. I mean, it's up there. We need to really take hold of this. Another question that I meant to put that into a question form. I guess I did in the beginning.
Well, you did. You made a statement.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Concerning agreements like NAFTA and GATT and so forth, do you think that if we had those agreements repealed, and then reinstated import tariffs so that companies that have moved out of the United States in order to get cheap slave labor would suddenly find they're only on a competitive, not a dominating level by importing those goods that used to be produced in the United States. Do you think that would tend to bring the manufacturing base back to this country?
I think, I never believe in tariffs. I think, you know, if we impose a tariff on some of our products, then someone else is going to impose a tariff on the products we got to get from them. We've got to trade because a lot of the things that we need come from other countries. We don't, you know, just like we enjoy fruits and vegetables year round. When I was a young person, we didn't because it mostly came from the United States. But there are places in the world can grow stuff year round. So I don't think the tariff would. I do think would do, and I think we're moving in that direction. Probably not as rapid as we should. But the thing is, we've got to retrain our people who are unemployed to do jobs that exist, and that's going to cost money. And I think that's the best way to do it. Even though the jobs that are coming back, the manual labor is done by robots, and then you have digitals, and you have technology that do a lot of other stuff that people used to do. But I think if we retrain people to work in that environment, then we can be competitive. That's the only way we can be competitive against cheap labor, is to do that. And then we won't have to be dealing with the tariff, because we wrestled with tariffs for years and years, and someone concluded, and I agree, that that's not working, because we increase the tariff, there is, you know, a zero-sum game. I think we could rewrite these agreements in a way that would insist that those nations pay their people more, and provide, you know, and deal with environmental issues. We could write that into those contracts that may have an impact and would give us a better opportunity to be competitive. But I don't know. You may be right, the tariffs. But the historical experience said it wasn't right, because if we increase one, someone will increase another one with us, and so we don't get any place. I hope I answered your question, but that's how it's kind of how I see it, yes.
I was never for the NAFTA. Okay, you said you were.
Yeah.
And my gut just said there's something not right with this. And then it was confirmed. What it allowed was agribusiness to flood the markets in Mexico with their corn. And what that triggered a lot of these family farmers unable to, you know, compete with this cheap corn. And they ended up having to leave their family farm and come here. Okay, so that's been one of the reasons why there's been this wave of migration. And one other thing, agribusiness also with NAFTA did the same thing with Haiti. And that was a result where family farmers could not sustain their families.
It's the same thing in Africa.
I mean, you know.
Countries in Africa that used to be self-sufficient in food production are no longer that way.
So, you know, now they're talking about the agreement with the Asia, you know, this, I forgot.
Pacific.
The Trans-Pacific.
Yeah, Trans-Pacific, yeah.
We're going to, you know, it's going to be not for our benefit, the benefit of citizens of the USA, but for the benefit of these international corporations.
Yeah, that's what we got to wake up to and demand that we have fairness in that situation, that the government represents all of us, not just a certain segment. You know, they can argue that, you know, we argued this in order to make China one of those favorite nation agreements. And that thing, if you study how it passed Congress, it wasn't the usual process, but it happened during Clinton's administration. And, you know, it's so much we don't understand about things. Well, I mean, I think most people are becoming aware that cheap labor hurts us. And we need to we could have built into NAFTA environmental concerns, work concerns, not use child labor and stuff like that. We could have written that into it. It would have probably been better if they had done that, but that wasn't done. And so we probably going to need to renegotiate it, because I believe the same thing with the Pacific Northwest that they're talking about a great deal, and the agreement that we reached with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama. It's going to be the same thing, because our greatest export is agricultural products, and we subsidize the ag people with see, I grew up in the farm, know how it works. They first told us limited acreage we could have for cotton and corn, anything that we sold. And then if you plant over, they would come and ply it up. And then they started paying us, so I couldn't pick cotton. And when they started paying us for not to grow cotton, I was a happy camper. So we made more from that than we did from grazing the cotton. And so those are still there. The big agro companies still get it, and they don't need it, but they still get it. And so that's, we subsidize agricultural products through those processes, and we do a lot of other things to what we call maintain parity between the cost of production, agricultural productions, and the market. So it's a lot of things that we need to be doing. I just kind of brushed through some of the more critical ones, but there are a lot of number of things that we need to think about when we make these agreements, enter into these agreements. We need to be certain it's for the national interest and not for the corporate interest, because the Defense Department has been, the State Department, probably the largest function of the State Department is the counselor's office, and all they do is try to arrange business deals for American companies. And we use the Army a lot of times so that our companies can do business. And then they don't want to pay taxes. So we got to do something about that. Go ahead and finish the questions, and then I can sit and listen to you rebut me and eat my hamburger.
Yeah, one more question. There are several, I know we got a lot of veterans coming back from Afghanistan and the other places. My son-in-law is one, and I read several large corporations have got initiatives to hire the veterans. I assume that would involve training and placement and things like it. Do you see that as a step in the right direction?
I really do. I say the best education program we had after World War I was we called the GI Bills of Right, the Service and Readjustment. You had more people went to college because the incentive was to go to college. They were paying you like $130 a month, paying you tuition. The minimum wage was 75 cents an hour. 8 hours would give you $35 a week. They were better off going to college than they were working. So they chose to go to college. And that is what helped this nation be great after World War II, is that. And I think if we do this, it will help tremendously. It's an investment. It's not a giveaway.
Thank you.
Who's next? Any more questions? Are we running out of questions? We just ran out of questions. Run a question.
Can I sit down?
Yeah, sit down. Now it's your turn to talk, so you get to, whoever wants to get up here can. And I also want to point out that it's Elizabeth Enneman's birthday today, or tomorrow, and we got a cheesecake, so you can all have some, and she's gonna bring it out. So it is a big cheesecake. You got small pieces. Anyway, you can't eat too much cheesecake anyway. It's not good for you. So, no, it's little small pieces. She's bringing out the place now. You're not going to know. So anyway, she'll bring this out. And meanwhile, we'll have our... No, he didn't order his food yet. We got to get...
Yes, sir. Bacon cheeseburger. You want some french fries with that?
Whatever you want. Whatever you want.
That's all I need.
Something to drink? Iced tea?
Are you taking the order?
No. I'm just making sure he's happy, you know. we got to take care of our speaker, you know. He was, yeah. Anyway, it's your turn to talk. So who wants to be first to rebut the speaker, to respond to what the speaker has had to say here tonight? Someone has something in their mind. Aha! There's somebody raised his hand. He gets to be here first. You got 5 minutes.
I guess my finger went up a little quicker than I thought, but you and I are of like mind on many issues. But in terms of education, I think I agree with you. The problem is we have to update the institution, both in that particularly and also in general, and those other categories I'll talk about in a bit. But with education, of course, it's too expensive. I'm glad you said that. But also when people leave, I mean, the problem is you don't, as a student, you don't understand how much money you're borrowing because you have to do it. You know what I mean? You like in my case, I had parents that were poor. I had to take on that debt. I mean, I had scholarships and I had other means of acquiring income. And I think in the generation that preceded me, one of which in particular, I know a guy that worked his way through UT Law School only on a part-time job. That's unheard of now. You know, so I just said, fine, I'll borrow it. I know I need an education. I have to get it, you know. And then by the time I was through, I was kind of overwhelmed by how much I managed to borrow, but there was just no other way to do it. So I think that also impacts your life choices, because if you want to start a business, for instance, you may not be able to because you have to pay that debt. You can't take on other risks because you're tied to that. That also goes to healthcare too. That's one thing you didn't talk about, and one thing that that seems to be off the radar in a sense, in that, in a way, because I think Democrats think because the Affordable Care Act passed, then there's nothing else to do. Whereas the Republicans are spending all 100% of their energy trying to get rid of it. You know, but the thing is, the status quo ante was unacceptable. You know, that's one thing, and reform must take place. It's too expensive. It's more expensive here than anywhere else. But where I'm going with that is, like education, that ties us to that debt, and it hurts our economy in general, and it hurts our innovation because we can't take risks that we otherwise would. So that's costing us there. Okay. Also with education is people are going out of school, taking on unpaid internships. I mean, that's a new concept. You work for free in getting an education that you've already completed, but yet it's unsatisfactory, so you need more, you know. So hoping to have something to put on your resume, you take on a full-time job that pays nothing. That makes no sense. So what I see is companies are not reinvesting in education. They've got to kind of do that to some extent. They used to do that up until even the time I got out of school, which was about the mid-90s, where I had friends of mine who were hired by companies where they did not have the particular qualifications to meet that job, but the company saw something that was attractive in them to deem them as trainable. They could do the job, but they were willing to invest some kind of training, and those friends of mine have gone on and they've been successful in those companies reacquiring those skills. I don't see that happening now. I just don't. I see the unpaid internship taking that place. The one thing about...
We give her a happy birthday. You still got the clock.
Somebody's birthday.
We're not going to take this out of your time.
We're going to take it out of your time, no.
Quick happy birthday, and we'll get it over with.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Elizabeth. Happy birthday to you.
Get your wish. Get your wish. A big pretty candle.
Well, that's pretty neat.
Wow.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, the next thing was the filibuster. I think I agree with you, but I reluctantly agree with you. There's a point where, during the Bush administration, where I really like to have that filibuster there, for judges in particular like Janice Rogers Brown, who incidentally was, I think, maybe it was her or the other one, that wrote the opinion that overruled the abortion decision out of the federal court. She was one of the the Fifth Circuit judge that wrote the opinion. And she's apparently, not just that, but I think she's qualified for that job. Anyway, that notwithstanding, I think it's going to cut both ways. That may not be a bad thing. Elections ought to have consequences. I think it's ridiculous to have so many filibusters over positions that should be filled. Okay, so I can concede that. Okay, also citizenship for business entities. I don't think you put it that way, but maybe that's a way to have it. Maybe something, corporations, LLCs, and the like need to have a citizenship status attached, maybe for certain requirements. They'd have to hire a certain number of U.S. citizens. They'd have to pay them a certain amount. They'd have to have certain workplace conditions, whatever, but that citizenship could be revoked. Maybe the good thing for the citizenship would be a lower tax rate versus a higher tax rate. I'm not sure about the policies of that. I'm just kind of brainstorming right now, but I think that has a certain appeal, just the citizenship attached to the business entities. Also, about poverty in general, I think you kind of opened the door, or there was an invitation to criticism, I think, that could be coming. But by saying that the poor or those on welfare they recognize welfare as something to be stable. Yes, that may be true. Right. But there's a book that came out. It's called Scarcity. It's brand spanking new. I just ordered it. I haven't had time to read it yet. But what compelled me to buy it was an interview that I heard of the authors, one of which I think is an economics professor at Harvard who won the MacArthur Genius Award. And the other one I think is a sociology professor, I think at Princeton. But their premise is that when a resource is scarce, we tend to squander it. And that applies to time. It also applies to money. So their point, and they talk about different issues where that's the case, but when they talk about money, it's that when a lot of times poverty causes poor decisions. And the reason that's the case is because poor people are often so overwhelmed with just, when they go to the store, trying to figure out exactly what to get that fits within their budget. They're so overwhelmed with just getting to the store. They're so overwhelmed with just being where they need to be and coordinating like public transportation, for example, that exhausts their emotional and intellectual bandwidth, that they cannot make other decisions that the others of us would take for granted. So I think that may be another way of looking at it, and I look forward to reading more about that. I mean, it's fascinating. That's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Okay, you're next. Here's some cake. Grab some.
But don't take them to your nieces.
Okay, who's next? There has to be a next. Over here. Oh, you're next. Come on up here.
Hi, everyone. I actually think about our job situation quite a bit because I work in an industry where we can't hire people fast enough for all the work. It's a highly competitive industry. I mean, we actually can get recruiters calling us for jobs. The recruiters are more aggressive looking for us than we're looking for jobs. And so I start to think about that. I'm like, okay, well, how does that happen? One of the things that results from that, from having a highly competitive industry, the companies in general tend to value their workforce more because there's an example. They can't hire people fast enough. It takes a lot of investment to hire these people. They have to hire recruiters, help bring them in, all this stuff. So they usually will provide better salaries, better benefits, and all this stuff because they have to basically entice you to come work for them because you might get offers from 5 different companies. So what's going on is that I always wonder, well, how can we spread that across into other industries? And the other thing I always question is, so how can we train more people to do these kind of jobs in robotics, engineering, science? That's where the jobs are. We have a lot of open positions in the United States in those areas. And I always wonder like how we can get more people to be trained in that. Because sometimes people ask me, because they know I make a good living, and they're like, well, okay, what kind of job do you do? And I tell them, okay, what type of training they need. And people are like, oh, I have to get a degree in biology? Okay, never mind. I mean, so that's the thing we need to kind of promote that awareness. And plus, it's impossible. I didn't know this job existed when I was in high school. Didn't know it existed. Didn't know the industry existed. Didn't know any of it existed when I was in high school. I just went to college and got a degree in biology because I was interested in it. But eventually time progressed and you're constantly looking at new things. So what we need to think about is that, like how can we promote awareness and promotion of young people into education, into engineering, science, and robotics. Second of all, the other thing I think about is how there's so many things that factor into the jobs problem in our country. First of all, the cost of benefits. For example, if we were to take providing health insurance from the companies and provided a universal system of care, that would free up a lot of money for these companies to hire more people. So that's one example, okay? Second example, and they might be able to pay better salaries and more benefits in other areas. That's another example of the economic problem that occurs from our policies in healthcare and a lot of other things. There's a couple other examples of that. And also globalization is not the evil incarnate. There are many companies that live here in the US and have employees all over the world. And those companies are able to get their employees in those countries and be able to establish liaisons with people in those countries and be able to conform their processes to the local culture, which we have a hard time doing in our foreign policy friends. We need to be able to adapt to the local culture. And these companies can do that. We can learn from them. The other thing is that one of the other things that I think about all the time is what other things factor in. As of course, we already mentioned education. We already mentioned poverty. I mean, it's really hard to learn something if you're hungry, you don't have shoes, and you were shot at on your way walking to school. It's really hard for you to learn. And we have children in the United States that are dealing with that every day. They're hungry, they don't have proper clothing, they're getting shot at on the way to school, and little simple things that we can do. We can feed them, we can give them clothes, and maybe they might actually learn better and do better in the long term. So there's a lot of little simple things that we could do that we don't to promote education and to make it a little bit easier. And I really think that the root of a lot of our problems is poverty. It really is. We look at poverty in other countries and we do so much for it, and I'm all for that. I mean, but when we're struggling, and you know, like what John was saying earlier, it's hard to think when you're constantly worried about where you're going to get your next meal, whether you have a roof over your head, how you're going to get to work. Because a lot of these poor people have to take 3 different buses to get to work. Okay. How they're going to be able to pick up their kids, where their kids are going to go after school, because they don't get off work till 5 and their kids get off school at 3. What are they going to do? I can't afford to do an after school program. Well, I guess I'll just have to let them go home or send them to a friend. You have very minimal choices in these situations. And so the cycle of poverty continues and continues and continues from generation to generation to generation. They don't learn the skills they need to get an appropriate job. They don't learn the skills they need to grow and actually provide helping with the unemployment numbers. And I don't agree at all that there's people out there that are just want to stay on welfare and don't want to work. I don't agree with that at all. I meet people all the time that are working their tails off and they're still not able to make ends meet, and they have to take the subsidies. And one of the other things I found kind of interesting was Bill Maher said something quite fascinating the other day. He was saying, he goes, I don't understand why we allow these companies to hire these employees, pay them substandard wages, do not provide them benefits, and we provide these companies tax subsidies, tax benefits, and I'm mentioning Walmart as a big example of that. And then they don't pay their employees adequate, so we as the taxpayers have to provide the benefits that these companies should be providing to these people. And we're like, okay, fine, whatever. We don't argue about that. And I was like, you go, Bill Maher. Because that's a very logical reasoning on how we can say, okay, look, we need to work through this because that's what these companies are doing, and we're allowing them to get away with it. And with the immigration is also an issue that affects how the job market in the U.S. You know, there's so many of these growers that I've heard, they're like, well, I cannot get people to come do the job of picking my cotton or whatever. And I'm like, well, how much are you willing to pay them to pick your cotton? You know, I mean, are you willing to pay them minimum wage, or are you used to paying people substandard wages because you got away with paying illegal immigrants to do the job all this time? So that's part of the problem is, one, we don't punish the corporations for paying substandard wages. We don't punish the corporations for hiring people who are illegal. And we don't take into consideration the fact that, you know, jobs are competitive. If they're gonna get the cheapest person they can get for that job, they're gonna get the cheapest person they can get for that job. And what we gotta do is, you know, promote awareness and education that that's not okay. That the most valuable thing to a company is their employees. They can't sell, they can't manufacture, and they cannot provide a service without those employees to do the job for them. They can say all they want about how we got to provide, you know, we got to have a certain amount of profits for the people who buy our stocks and all this stuff. But they can say that all day long. But the stock is worthless if there's nothing being manufactured, there's nothing being sold, and there's nothing being, no service being provided. And all of that stuff does not happen without their employees. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? There's got to be a next. John Beasley.
Well, Calvin, thanks very much. It was very, very interesting. You've outlined a lot of problems, and I think that I gave a talk about 30 years ago at Richland College. It was about management. And the first thing I did, I showed a picture of the huge pyramid at Giza. And I said, take a good look at that. What do you think? Do you think that a band of people showed up one day and it appeared? No. Someone had to plan that. So the first lesson in life, doing anything, you have to plan it. You have to understand what you're doing and plan it and think about it, okay? Now, one of the problems of America, you have two factions at work. I talk about economics a lot, but there's one faction that believes in laissez-faire. That's to say, you do no planning, you let things take their course, and everything will turn out fine. Well, we've done that for 30 years, and I think most people now agree things have not turned out fine. We have all these various problems. I think the function of government, of somebody in government, is to say, okay, folks, we have these problems, and you've outlined them, I won't have to repeat them. But they have to, somebody in government, and we have two parties that appear to be at war, and we have totally dysfunctional government. But somebody has to say, look, these are our problems, and these are my proposed solutions. If they don't, I mean, I had to produce products. I was a manager. And so I had to figure out how we're going to do this, what people I need, make sure everybody knew what they were doing, and then we moved. And so the thing had to work, and it had to make money. So you have to plan. Now, that's what our leaders have to do. Otherwise, they're not leaders. Otherwise, they're not worth having. So we, as a country, we need to stand up and say, we need leaders that provide solutions. That's what we pay you for. We don't pay you for to go to Washington and grab all the money you can and have bun fights that, you know, that's ridiculous. It's totally ridiculous. So I think most people will now say, look, we need solutions. We're in a problem. I think most people will agree. Many people years ago, when I began talking about this 30 years ago, when I saw what Reagan was doing, and most people said, well, John's an American, okay? I mean, I could see what was coming. And I don't think they could, because they couldn't believe what has happened. I mean, I can't believe what has happened. I can't believe that America is $16 in debt to the rest of the world. It's unimaginable. To China, of all countries. I mean, come on. I mean, it's amazing. It truly is amazing. Now, the question is, how are you going to get out of it? Number one, I go back to Bretton Woods. I talked to Ray about that last week, okay? Maynard Keynes said, this is how you do balanced trade, okay? You don't need fair trade, you need to have balanced trade. I will go into that sometime, I will, but that's one way. Education costs too much, healthcare costs too much. There are ways other countries do this quite well. Now, what about industrial management? Now, in Germany, they have a whole different way of looking at work. They have, for example, the vice president of BMW was the chief union leader. Okay, he's vice president. They don't treat people as nothing, that you have to, you know, get as much money from them as possible. They treat them as real people. I mean, when you look at, I've said this before, our balance sheet, I mean, you've got all these assets that I'm supposed to be managing, tables and chairs and buildings, but the most important thing to manage is the people. They're the asset of any business. Now, if you treat them as expendable, if you treat them as, I'm going to pay you the least I can, give you the fewest benefits, what do you get? You get resentment, you get unhappiness, and in the end, you'll get an unprofitable outfit. So, this country has to do a whole change of mindset amongst its leaders, okay? So what we really have is poor leadership in both parties. And my message to these guys, and Republicans and Democrats, get the message up to the top, you are poor. You are poor leadership. Now there are people that have ideas and would be good leaders. Let's find them, for goodness sake. We've seen such leaders in the past, and mostly in times of war and need, and I think most people would say, and I would say, we're on that verge of collapsing. There's going to be a major crash in this economic system in America, and it's coming soon. It's soon. You can't go on spending money on the tab forever. It's like a credit card. You've got a limit, and you can go on spending to that limit, and when you reach it, boom, you're gone. And that's what this country's done. And it's just, as you said, it's just that it done everything to do to undermine itself. It sabotaged itself. And my famous book, Sabotaging America, explained that. Okay, I can't believe it myself. It's almost incredible to believe. It really is. But so we need leadership. We need people that have plans which say, these are the problems and these are our solutions, folks, and lay them out before. You can have a Republican Party with their plans and any other party with their plans, and explain how it's going to work, okay? No use saying, I believe in this dogma, and I hope it works. I mean, come on. You have to explain why it works, why it would do it. Just as I had to do when I put a product together, we had to work through everything. How reliable it's going to be, what's it going to cost us. When you have a definite plan to put forward. I couldn't say to some customer, oh, I'm very sorry, I have no idea why it doesn't work anymore. And really, that's what it takes for for running a country. You have to explain what's to be done, why it's to be done, and how we're going to do it. And I think the American people are ready and crying for leadership. That's why I think, but they've given up. I mean, in England, the latest, there's a well-known comedian, and he says to people, don't vote. There's nobody to vote for. They have no solution, so, give up. Well, that's one way, I suppose. But that's the way people feel, because they all say the same thing, they all look the same, act the same, So, I don't know, folks. You've got to say to the people you elect, look, what you've said is nonsense. It's not good enough. We the people, demand better. And until you demand better, you're going to get the same old nonsense.
Who's next? Ray? All right, Ray.
All right.
We're running out of time.
Yeah, we're running out of time.
Maybe I won't take even 5 minutes.
We're running out of time.
Well, to me, the most amount of wisdom and intelligence came from this lady here. What is your name? Norma. She said the most in the shortest time. Globalization, the reason companies outsource jobs, my friend, is because we do not have a friendly job climate here. It is hostile to jobs. If a company realizes that they have laws and pressures and politicians on top of them, they will either move, go out of business, or they will outsource. They will do whatever it takes to survive. And when our country is not business friendly, we're not going to have more jobs and more businesses. It just isn't going to happen. More government, more pressure, more taxes, and you're going to have less jobs because they are not going to live with that. They're going to do all they can to survive. That's what businesses do. That's what you would expect them to do. We have right to work laws because these companies do not want to be in a state that is going to be heavily unionized. It's going to drive the cost way up. They can't do business or they can't make money. And so the unionization is going to hurt the number of jobs. It always does. It always does. And jobs are coming to Texas because we are a right to work state. People can work here without being part of a union. Not only that, we have that tort reform, which means that the lawyers can't make billions of dollars off of some company. There is always the certain amount of punishment for whatever the infraction is, but at least lawyers don't get rich, and that's why we have tort reform. Companies can feel comfortable about coming here because they're not going to get sued and remove all of remove their whole business and go bankrupt because of some lawsuit. Boeing in Seattle was trying to move to South Carolina. It's a right to work state. They were trying to get out of Washington. Can't blame them because of all the taxes, all the regulations, and all of the problems that they have to put up with in Washington. And of course, it's more unionized. The last part of this is we have, I'm afraid, a culture, as she has said, of getting entitlements, of getting welfare. We have taught the kids this. They are growing up with this attitude. And whenever we have this attitude in the culture, it's no wonder that the whole goal of some of the young people who are strong and sturdy is just to find out how to get on the next government program. Jim, wherever he is, he says he sends people off to get to a job interview and they don't even want the job. All they were trying to do is show qualification that they tried to get a job and they didn't get it, so they continue on the welfare. It's a culture like that. We are encouraging it. When we listen to this, politicians have an incentive for giving more welfare. Did you know that? Because the people getting the welfare will vote for that politician. It works every time. And the politicians are glad to give away somebody else's money to any number of people, because those people will indeed vote for them, and they will stay in power. One of the phrases that John just got through saying is, so how do we get out of this? How do we get out of this? How do you get out of just digging this hole? You stop digging the hole. And if we don't stop digging the hole, those last words John said, the country is going to go down. I'm not one to take a question.
I wanted to ask you, because I think that you're absolutely right to talk about welfare and the need for us to quit living off of it. But what about the welfare that Karl Rove talked about that we need to get rid of, and that is the welfare to companies?
Welfare what?
To companies.
I agree. We should not give any money to any company at any time, ever. No money.
People that are on welfare, it's the companies that are on welfare.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, we're running out of time.
Let's just
Yeah.
get it. Ray knows that we'll talk later.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say a couple things. I'll try to be short. Oh, maybe. Anyway, my wife's telling me don't talk about. Thank you for. Well, anyway, I gotta. First of all, I want to thank our speaker. He did a great job tonight. And he gets to respond to all the comments that were made here, so we'll let him do that, because we're going to run out of time. If I talk too long here, I'm going to put everybody to sleep. We want to do that. They don't want to hear me anyway, so you're up.
Really, I know that people have strong beliefs and values and opinions, and it's not much you can say to change that with some people. Most of what the gentleman talked about, I did indicate some of the welfare issues, and I talked a little bit about what Congress had done. And during this calendar year, most of their voting was to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And they spent all kinds of time doing it. They did it 41 times. And they didn't pass the appropriation bill. So that was their negligence. The issue of poverty is very, very complex. And it's going to take a lot of work to get people to do it. I think the young lady that talked about our own extended family recognized that. When I grew up, there were people who were poor, but we didn't think we were poor. And that's what's bad, when people believe they're poor. That's hard to overcome. And when jobs, one of the things when unions were the strongest, unemployment was the lowest. When the union was the strongest, in my research it dealt with when Michigan was given in automobile industries all kinds of, wage increases, all kinds of security things and health care and benefits. And then they changed and they began to take those benefits away. So it's not the employee that's important, but our stockholders. And so that's what it is. It should be an equilibrium in that whole process. And the federal government should set a framework for things to take place, not to run things, but to set a framework. If the Affordable Health Care Act, it has done away with the experience rating. That's what made it so difficult for people who didn't have insurance, was not a part of a group. They couldn't afford to buy the health insurance, and when they purchased it, it was nothing. And so we are on a community rating system, like maybe the whole North Texas area will be in a community rating system. And that's going to pull premiums down over time. That's going to pull premiums down for most people. I think companies and their employees should probably pay for their health care. And because the affordable health care really is focusing a great deal on those people who don't have health insurance, and creating a mechanism for them to obtain health insurance. Now we've got another punchline that they have policies that have high deductibles and high co-payments and cover very little. It doesn't cost too much. And so now the companies have notified their accounts in those policies because affordable health care has a minimum benefit package that has to be there, and they don't meet that test, so that's why they go up. But I would imagine if they enroll in affordable health care, they'll have better insurance. It may cost them a little bit more money because I hope they didn't get sick with the policy that they had because it didn't cover that much. I appreciate any of the feedback that I got because, I don't have this opportunity to talk to people who have a better understanding than junior college students have. Thank you very much.
We're done here, but we're going to retire to Starbucks down the street, so you're all welcome. And maybe our speaker will come down there. We'll give him some free coffee and keep him going for a while. Anyway, we'll reconvene at Starbucks down the street.
This is William, your videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like us, or follow us, and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call. So when visiting the Barbeck's restaurant, tell them you want your reservation to the next College of Complex class.